So welcome to all of you for this start of the Open Forum, which is live stream. And as your chairman and three vice chairmen are finishing their 3-year term, which lasted from October 2015 until October 2018, the Executive Council will proceed tomorrow with elections for this position at the conclusion of its meeting. This is why we felt that it was the correct time to view our main accomplishments during the past 3 years and to look at the core challenges which are facing global racing and our federation in the future. First and foremost, I want to thank our delegates in attendance and each of our members from all over the world. Earlier this year, we asked you to complete a detailed questionnaire that surveyed the most important key issues in your domestic and regional markets and for global horse racing. We had a strong response, and you would have received a detailed summary of 90 pages by email early last week. In addition, the chairman of our technical committees all submitted a high-level overview of the most significant areas of concern for the coming years, and I want to thank them for that. Because these reports which you have in the document which was sent to you are very complete, and I think they cover all the main issues. These efforts were the baselines of the Federation leadership, our Executive Office, our Executive Council, and the Vice Chairman, to prioritize and detail our strategic path forward for the next years and beyond. I'm very privileged to be joined by Brian, Jim, Winfried, and Andrew Harding, to go over those plans in more detail. But before we look ahead, let's look back at the previous period and reflect on goals that have been met, work that is ongoing, and what still needs to be accomplished. You will not be surprised that I will start as issue number 1, which have been covered during the past 3 years, but talking about integrity of racing. As you heard me say before, and I continue to articulate, horses should only compete when they are free from the influence of medication and other banned substances and practices. There are countries, individuals, and resources working tirelessly to make this principle a reality worldwide, including those who comprise the IFHA's Advisory Council on Equine Prohibited Substance, which has been doing a marvelous job over these past 3 years. The most substantial effort made in the past 3 years was to create a reference lab certification program with an aim to augment the quality of testing around the world and to appoint a series of analytical sites that satisfy a high benchmark that include the scale of operations, resourcing, research activity, and capability to detect the use of prohibited substance, including the major doping agents, which are becoming a big challenge and which are substances that stay for not very long, with a very short stay in the body of the horse, and means that you need clearly to do some out-of-competition testing. Under the leadership of Andrew Harding, RLSC, the Reference Lab Appointment Committee Chair, and the late Dr. Bonner, who was the RLTC Chair, the Technical Committee, we were able to see 5 labs appointed, and we are hopeful to see others make the application to reach these statutes. The 5 labs were the French lab, English, Hong Kong, Melbourne, and UC Davis in California. Article 6 of the International Agreement has also been fortified with respect to genetic and cellular manipulation, and the need for a vigorous out-of-competition testing program that allows for racing authorities to carry out testing for prohibited substance at any time in the career of any horse, from the commencement of training to final retirement from training. And I really insist on that. The fight against doping in racing is truly as strong as the out-of-competition testing in place. I continue to implore all racing bodies from all around the world to adopt and implement this principle as quickly as feasibly possible. I must also thank the Advisory Council for the development and implementation of a number of new international screening limits, as well as the valuable intelligence that we are able to gather for global racing. Point number 2 that I will raise is harmonization. Uniformity remains of utmost importance for our sport, and I'm encouraged to see increased cross-nation participation of horses, trainers, and jockeys, which is already growing around the world. That ideal translates to regulation, and through the leadership of Kim Kelly, chair of the Committee for the Harmonization of Race Day Rules, a modern interference rule was memorialized as an article of the international agreement at the end of 2017. France and Germany have been going on to implement this rule into their local regulations, bringing harmonization across the European racing continent with the support of IFHA. You will hear from Kim Kelly later in the afternoon, and he will share how that came to fruition, what progress has taken place, and what still needs to be done. But it bears repeating the inclusion in the international agreement of a model rule on deciding protest objections has represented one of the most important achievements in the IFHA quest for a major racing rule to be harmonized across all member countries. And very clearly, it has been very important because if we want to develop international betting, simulcast, commingling, without a common model rule for interference, that would have no sense. And I'm confident that the harmonization of the integrity rule will take longer, but I'm sure it will come, and I hope it comes before the end of the next 3 years. Concerning betting, clearly, we have been trying to have an uniformity to speak to the efforts required to ensure an attractive wagering option for punters. When we mention betting, we must also cite the great work undertaken by the Asian Racing Federation and their anti-illegal betting task force, which conducted research on illegal betting markets and their impact in several notable ARF jurisdictions. Illegal betting is large and growing, and has threatened the integrity of competition and foster other illicit and prohibited activity. Later in this session, I will ask Winfried how the research conducted in the Asian racing region could be applied more globally. Point number 4, which has been a success, is our relation with Longines. Regarding the Federation's most visible products, the Longines World Best Racehorse Ranking and its related awards and ceremonies, we were proud to extend the original sponsorship in October 2015, and we'll enjoy this great partnership with Longines until at least 2023. So we have still 5 years ahead of partnership. The creation of the Longines World Best Horse Race Award has led to increased media attention for the premier race days on the global calendar. Our ceremonies have now touched nearly every part of the world and have elevated to a place of prestige and esteem for owners, trainers, jockeys, and racing personality. We are continuously pursuing new methods to amplify the presence of the IFHA and Longines partnership in global racing, and we have many of you to thank for our past success and for their support. Later in this session, you will hear what plans are in store for the coming years. Point number 5, we come back to IFHA. It concerns quality control. The quality control of black type and group races falls under the watch of IFHA and various regional committees. And in recent years, there have been significant strides made to ensure the consistent application of ground rules worldwide, as Carl told you earlier on. Since the period of October 2015, we have seen full integration of OSAF countries in Longines World Best Racehorse rankings and further development of international racing with the promotion of a number of races in Uruguay to Part 1. Hong Kong was promoted to Part 1 of the Blue Book, and additional races were opened to international competition. Korea was promoted to Part 2 and has seen their international days become staples on the racing calendar. IFHA has developed reports to analyze the quality of group and listed races in Part 1 based on ratings, and have reviewed efforts and procedures of the Longines World Best Racehorse Rankings Committee. IFHA has also completed an extensive survey of Part 2 countries to determine their existing quality control measures. We look to Brian for detailed insight of what steps IFHA and the various grading committees around the world will soon implement. Point 6, one of the issues we've been addressing, I think, with success concerns movement of horses, and it is a permanent challenge. In 2014, the IFHA and FEI joined forces to create International Horse Sports Confederation, of which I am the chairman for the time being. Since its inception, each of our federations have strived to work in harmony for the free movement of horses, advancement of clean competition, the surveillance, reporting and control of infectious disease, the promotion of a high health, high performance concept, and the protection of equine welfare. In late 2016, the IFHA and FEI took steps to make the IHSC, as it is more commonly known, as the overarching body to manage the relationship between the OIE, the International World Animal Organization, and our two groups. Since that, numerous OIE IHSC regional workshops have been staged with Johannesburg, Guatemala, and Montevideo counting as hosts in 2017 alone. A key driver for these works is to facilitate advancement in the temporary international movement of competition horses. And a broad range of private and government industry stakeholders, including representatives of National Equestrian Federation, representative of national racing authorities, and national veterinary authorities, and customs organizations. For the first time, we were as well talking to the customs representative with the support of OIE, and they play a very important role in the movement of horses. And they've been helping us to improve some local situations. These additional workshops are planned for 2019, including one in Hong Kong with the Chinese authorities. Research projects which are being jointly conducted by the OIE and IHSC have made significant progress, including 6 scientific studies on African horse sickness, equine influenza, and glanders. The IHSC has also given its in-principle agreement to support the development of a study in order to produce a new African horse sickness DIVA vaccine. We anticipate the development of a polyvalent vaccine and immunity studies to be completed for a new vaccine within approximately 18 months if everything goes well and if the results of the study are positive. This development and production of an African horse sickness vaccine would be a major achievement and would deliver a far-reaching positive impact on all sports around the world. I'll ask Winfried to comment more on the work of the International Sports Confederation with Andrew and the relationship and benefits we all realize through the relationships we maintain with both the OIE and FEI. Point number 7, which is a very important point for a lot of reasons, is horse welfare. Led by Jimmy Steer, our Horse Welfare Committee has developed a number of principles of good practice. These documents are related to euthanasia, injuries and fatalities, emergency care procedures, and aftercare, and they are now published on our website. I've been pleased to see closer liaison with the adoption and retraining world, noting the IFHA keeps regular correspondence with the IFHA, International Forum for the Aftercare of Racehorses, with who Jim is very involved. I am hopeful for the concentration on equine welfare to continue, as I know it is increasingly vital for the health and acceptance of our industry. Last but not least, I would like to point out the work which has been done over the past 3 years with the regional federations. There have been many successes in their work. We had been having world-class racing conferences in New York, Mumbai, Washington, D.C., Seoul. Both the Asian Racing and Pan American Conference are essential gatherings to shed light on the important issues facing world racing and those within a particular region. I look forward to attending the 38th Asian Racing Conference in Cape Town, and I'm hopeful for further iteration of the Pan American Conference in the not-too-distant future. The EMHF has been a leader on several key matters that not only affect European racing and breeding, but also the global industry. We must thank Brian Kavanagh, Nick Rust, Olivier Deloy, Paul Kahn, Paul-Marie Gadot, and countless others who have diligently studied the impact of Brexit on horse racing and made it known to Brussels what are the important and necessary steps to preserve our industry across these borders and to protect horse welfare. In addition, the EMHF continues to stage very informative educational seminars to aid its member countries. And this year, the EMHF held its General Assembly in Greece, welcoming a new member to their ranks, the Lithuanian Horse Racing Association. And OSAF, which is the oldest regional association in the racing world, continues to progress the South American region. The Longines Gran Premio Latinoamericano has elevated its status worldwide through its commercial partnership, and I have been extremely pleased to see advance in their quality control of black type races, rating systems, and most significantly, a number of their countries taking steps to secure the integrity of racing. This includes the elimination of race day medication for black type racers in its major racing nations and the utilization of an IFHA certified lab for the Latinoamericano and for black type racers at Jockey Club Brazil, Club Hípico, Hipódromo Chile, and for Part 1 race at Maronias. Billing plans are also in store for 2019 to see San Isidro use an IFHA certified lab for black type racers, and for Valparaiso to implement this testing for Group 1 and Group 2 races. So, OSAF, I know it's sometimes difficult to achieve these results and to take this decision, but I'm sure you've been doing a great job. In summary, I must say clearly that I'm very proud of the accomplishment of our federation and its technical committees under the leadership of many of you here today. But with that said, there is considerably more work to be done. What are the pressing matters? How can the Federation meet those challenges? And now pivot to detail the key strategic areas of concern, and along with our Vice Chairman and our Executive Director, Andrew Harding, you'll learn more about what initiatives will be progressed for the next year, and we will be then ready to answer your questions in the Q&A presentation. Thank you for your attention, and we'll now join my Vice Chairman. And very clearly, all this would not have been achieved without all of you and without the fantastic work of our technicians, which are put at our disposal free of charge and which are really helping us to concentrate. So we will start with the first part of the strategic plans. If you can show the first diapositive. I don't have the slide with me here. So the first point, as it was in my report, is concerning integrity and doping control. And I will ask both Winfried and Andrew to comment on what we think are the priorities for the coming years.
Chairman, Delegate, thank you very much. First of all, I think what Louis outlined is our first thought about a strategic plan, which we, in a way, as Chairman and Vice Chairman have discussed. And it will go in a much more in-depth discussion than with the EXCO. Looking at, in a way, especially doping control, and this is, if one reflects what we have achieved in the last years and what the basis would be for the future work, it is, in a way, that Article 6, and especially Article 6E, which clearly outlines, in a way, how races should be conducted to ensure the integrity, fairness, and horse welfare. This is definitely has been and will be always a focus of the Federation. And I think the 6E, Article 6E, is definitely a transformation of how the Federation has looked at how to conduct races. And it is not only about competition testing at the day, it is about the competition testing, during the training, etc., to ensure, like in any other sport, that you have really a race result which reflects the best athlete, and that, in a way, we have a fair and competition. Therefore, I think it is definitely this Article 6E has transformed how we look, in a way, as racing into this topic. And it is a clear objective, we think, necessary that the application and adaptation of Article 6E should be one of the three strategic goals of the Federation. And I think that links back practically to the reference labs. Because again, in a way, if you really want to have a clear doping mechanism and to avoid, in a way, systematic doping, you need capabilities of labs. And therefore, the Article 6E has definitely guided what kind of requirements are necessary, in a way, to test for prohibited substance. And my colleague later will go much more in detail what we have done and what we would like to recommend to go further. But the basis, and this is why I think this should be a clear focus of the Federation, especially what we want to achieve the next year, that all the major competitions we have in the world are under the same rules, which will ensure that we have not major doping agents are influencing the outcomes of competition. And that will be a significant effort necessary from the committee, from the executive committee, to convince people in a way to follow this roadmap in a way to achieve this within the IFHA, and that we in a way link definitely that the best horses in the world should follow these guiding principles. I would then recommend that Andrew goes a little bit more into the details what we have done in a way, especially if it comes now to our labs, to ensure this capability building, how much we have achieved, how many labs already we have, and what our objectives is in a way to widen this so that we then ensure with an aim in the future that all the top races in the world would be tested by labs who have this capability to ensure that the best horses in the world identify under the same rules and under the same medical capabilities of labs.
Thank you, Winfried. Starting as you suggested at where we are, what we've achieved. The Reference Laboratory Technical Committee and the Reference Laboratory Approval Committee have been established and endorsed by the Executive Council of the International Federation. And the major work of these two organs to this point has been to produce what we refer to as the White Manual. And the White Manual establishes very clearly the standards that a laboratory should meet in order to be considered appropriate for approval by the International Federation as a reference laboratory. And those standards are, as Winfried indicated, very much informed by, very much directed by Article 6E. Because when we discuss the notion of a reference laboratory, we want to identify those laboratories that have the capability to detect the major doping agents. And this is an increasingly difficult challenge. And so these capabilities are at a very high level. And they are the product of both scale of the particular racing laboratory, but also research. And this is one of the things that the White Manual particularly assesses, the capability to undertake the research that ensures that that laboratory will, on an ongoing basis, be able to detect the major doping agents. So this has all been crystallised in the White Manual. Now, if we look to the future, we have, as Winfried indicated, approved at this point 5 laboratories, 1 from Australia, 1 from Hong Kong, 2 from Europe, the UK and France, and 1 from North America, Maddie University. Plainly, if we want to arrive at our ultimate objective, which is to have this confidence that for certainly the top Group 1 races in the world, and ultimately really all group races in the world, we need to have a broader regional representation within the reference laboratory cohort. And so that is part of our vision as we look forward. Now, to achieve that, we've done several things. One is to, in a sense, look back and make sure that once approved, we have a means of being satisfied that those laboratories that once approved continue to meet the standard that's required to be considered a reference laboratory. And that depends on in particular, on a proficiency testing program. And so at the moment, the Reference Laboratory Technical Committee is developing the SOPs that would support this proficiency testing exchange program. We also need to formalise the appointment of assessors. These are the technical experts that will, on behalf of the Reference Laboratory Approval Committee, go out into the field and assess those laboratories that put themselves forward for consideration as reference laboratories. And we consider that this needs to be a very formal process. So we've researched the biographies, the CVs of those that have been suggested to us, and we will be proposing at the next reference laboratory approval committee that a small set of assessors be formally appointed by the RLAC and enter into formal legal agreements, having regard to such much as confidentiality. Another very important aspect of what we think we need to do for the future is to look to the top 100 races, the top 100 Group 1 races as identified by the IFHA. And we think as a quality assurance mechanism, there needs to be also a program for the exchange of samples from those races, so that within the existing reference laboratory cohort, there's a means of testing those samples again to ensure that the right outcome has been arrived at, to give us that confidence that for these races, we are meeting the challenge in terms of detecting major doping agents. If we look to the future, we have 5 laboratories at the moment. We have a number of applications in hand, others that have been anticipated. I think as an aspiration, we would hope that within the next 5 years, we'll have an additional 5 laboratories so that we can cover the globe, and we can see certainly for each of the countries that have races in the top 100, we have a reference laboratory. And then I think necessarily for each of those Part 1 countries that there is a reference laboratory available to carry out the testing. And that will require resources. The details of that are provided in the forward estimates for the IFHA budget. Particularly these relate to the assessors program and the proficiency testing program. In major part, the cost of this exercise is met by the applicant laboratories in terms of laboratories that apply. But for the future, there is also some cost that needs to be borne by the IFHA itself in terms of some of these proficiency testing measures to ensure that the IFHA has this confidence that when it gives the seal of a reference laboratory approved by the IFHA, that the IFHA can be confident that that's warranted.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Jim, when we talk about a no medication world, we always look at you and try to find out how it is progressing. Where is your legislation now? Are you still confident? And we would like also to know if there is a development of out-of-training sampling, because we have seen a very good program launched by the Breeders' Cup last year with testing of all the horses in advance in order to be sure that major doping agents have not been used. And we would like to have these programs of out-of-competition technique testing develop around the world, especially in your country.
Thank you, Louis. First of all, I want to compliment Andrew and the committee for some excellent work. From a standing start, you've built a program that I think very soon we can all rely upon. Knitting together these lab standards and some of the protocols that go with it is no small task, and I credit you for that hard work. Winfred mentioned Article 6E earlier. Certainly in principle, all of us feel strongly in support of it, in particular the Jockey Club in the United States. As you may know, in the United States, there are 38 jurisdictions that are responsible for racing, states, that have racing statutes. Of that, there's about 32 states that actively race. So our job right now in the present system is to go work with each of those jurisdictions to get them to adopt the regulations consistent with 6E, and that's no small challenge. Louis referenced the Breeders' Cup, who has been leading in this area of out-of-competition testing. Most of our testing in the United States is still post-race. Clearly, from what we've learned from human competition and from some of the fine work that's been done here to detect those types of drugs, those illicit drugs that are performance-enhancing, we're going to need to do a lot more than just post-race testing. The Jockey Club, for its part, over the last 4 years, has been providing grants to states to adopt more out-of-competition testing, and I can say we give ourselves a medium grade on adoption. We have much work to do, but as regards Louis' comment about our federal bill, in the 115th Congress of the United States, we introduced a bill called the Horse Racing Integrity Act of 2017. The purpose of that bill is to put a blanket over those 38 or 32 states and build a new system a system that would be authorized by the federal government, but in fact would be a private entity, a non-governmental entity, composed of governance of half of the United States Anti-Doping Agency, which is our human anti-doping agency that is considered a gold standard in the world for its efforts on behalf of our Olympic and Paralympic athletes. And the other half would be specific industry professionals from horse racing. They would govern a new agency that would sit above state regulations and provide the oversight of testing, of rule development, of investigations and prosecutions to ensure that our country, the United States, has the same standards of anti-doping that we all desire to have across all these jurisdictions represented today. Where do we stand? Well, we're coming to the closing days of that 115th Congress. We have in early November midterm elections, which I think will give us a sense of where this bill will be in the 116th Congress that begins on January 4th of 2019. At present, we have about 1/3 of the members of our lower house, the House of Representatives, committed to support this law. We do not have a companion bill in the upper house. We remain in deep negotiations with leaders there to bring a bill forward, certainly for 2019, if not sooner. This is no easy task, and we thank our supporters, the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association of North America, important racetracks such as Keeneland, New York Racing Association and their 3 racetracks, and Astronic Group. We have support of a grassroots organization in the United States with several thousand members called the Water-Hay Oats Alliance. And most importantly, we have the support of the IFHA, which I credit to Louis and to the leadership of the Exco in supporting us. So we have much work to do. We have different systems that we have to operate within in our state and federal systems, but we are undaunted and look forward to seeing the day when U.S. is completely compliant, which in our belief will protect the horse, will protect the rider, and will promote trade. And that's what conferences like this are all about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment, either Winfried or Andrew, on the other issues? More out of competition, we've been covering it. Air testing is just something that should progress to harmonize, and gene manipulation and editing, there will be a presentation from Dr. Cusano later on today. So we can go to the following slide. We will move to communication, and we'll go back to Jim, who is Vice Chairman following all these projects, which have been, I think, one of our great success. So what can we hope for the future?
Okay, so I'll take a few minutes to talk about our partnership with Longines and our communication strategies broadly. The IFHA signed its first partnership agreement with Longines in 2013, and for many of you familiar with those pictures, I'll now go like this and show my watch. Since 2015, we've co-organized 3 award ceremonies annually to honor the world's best racehorses and the world's best horse races. This partnership has been well received throughout the industry, and the award ceremonies have been highly successful. Through engagement with international members of the media and the use of social media and print and web content, we've been able to increase brand awareness of the partnership. So looking ahead, we want to continue the management and staging of the Longines award ceremonies each year. Through our print and digital strategies, we aim to educate the media and the entire industry on the context behind the world's best rankings. This includes social media, as well as enhanced areas of the IFHA website dedicated to the rankings and the pertinent content to supplement them. We're currently researching new content platforms such as video to increase our social media engagement. We'll work with the leadership team at Longines so that the IFHA can supplement efforts to market and brand the partnerships. In the future, this may include an expanded suite of awards that we will be considering. So this brings me to our general communications efforts. Within the IFHA, we're working to establish more frequent outreach engagement of our membership, as well as with the committee chairs prior to and following each of the technical meetings. Our content must not just reach our members, but also to the regional federations, and also to add members from small countries as we need. As always, we're looking for ways to improve this conference. We've had numerous discussions internally about that, and we hope to each year to improve the presentations, whether it's through increased audience interaction for those in attendance, as well as, frankly, for those online. More comprehensive coverage by the media, and we thank those that are here today, or a broader presence on social media, which, as we know, is an imperative. To expand the reach of the IFHA, we have committed to holding meetings of the Executive Committee in other locations in the future. We also want to ensure that relevant economic research and novel marketing and branding ideas are distributed to members so that all jurisdictions involved in the IFHA can learn from data and strategies that can benefit the racing businesses locally and on an international level. And lastly, we must promote the IFHA's contributions to and impact on racing. Across all media platforms, we should trumpet instances in which the IFHA's work to harmonize racing on a global scale has improved the safety, integrity, and welfare of the sport. Louis?
Thank you very much. So we'll now move to the next slide, please, which is what we started to discuss this morning with the report of IFHA, and I will ask our Vice Chairman in charge of quality control, Brian Kavanagh, to talk about it.
Thank you, Louis, and good morning, everybody. As Carl touched upon it, I think the quality control of racing is probably one of the most important pieces of work that we do as a federation. And IFHA has made great strides in the last number of years in pulling together the different regions around the world and looking at the systems in which they operate to generate quality control. That said, it is a reality that in the reports which Carl referred to earlier in the meeting, that 49% of the Group 1 races that were run around the world last year did not meet Group 1 rating parameters. So the quality control issue is something which must remain to the fore in our thinking. I think IFHA has had a number of successes in the last 3 years. We've seen the integration of South America into the world rankings, which has been a great achievement. We've seen the upgrading of Hong Kong and Korea to various parts of the Blue Book. And we've seen a progress in understanding the systems of quality control which operate around the world. I think for the next 3 years, IFHA is looking at a number of issues, and we've snapped up the services of Phil Smith, the recently retired senior handicapper from the British Horse Racing Authority, to help us with this work. And the type of work which needs to be done is to continue the type of analysis which Carl referred to in looking at the group races around the world, analysing them relative to the foal crops of each country, relative to the number of horses in the world rankings, and relative to the overall number of horses in training and races in those countries. Obviously, it's a challenge to balance the requirements of a number of different countries and a number of different regions worldwide, and the suggestion can't be that you simply look to develop an elite category of races to the exclusion of all other races or all other important races around the world. I think we recognise that in a number of countries, races that are historically important, and are the best races in those countries must be recognised as such, while still trying to manage a system which provides consistency for sales catalogues around the world. And that is a challenge, but it's one which I think now, with the information that's at our disposal, we're in a better position to take on and look at. So the work which we will do is look at the systems which are operating in Part 2 countries. And the interesting thing which emerged from Korea and from talking to a number of other countries, the idea of being upgraded in the Blue Book or to have your racing promoted in the Blue Book is something which countries aspire to. It's not so much in relation to the impact that has on sales catalogues or the impact that it has on the ratings of the race, but it's a formal way of recognition from a body, a respected body like the IFHA and like the Society of International Thoroughbred Auctioneers, that racing in that country is trying to do the right thing and is moving in the right direction. So we're working with the Part 2 countries, as Carl said earlier, to look at the systems that they operate for rating horses, to look at the systems they operate for implementing quality control, and to try and develop a more defined criteria for inclusion of those races in the appropriate area of the Blue Book. I think that's a very important exercise. Some of the systems are quite basic and quite, a blank sheet of paper. Some of them are more advanced, and I think we were pleasantly surprised at the level of advancement in a number of the countries. So I think IFHA can work with those countries and with the regional bodies to try and improve that situation. We're moving to better understand the systems which each region uses for assessing quality control. And no system is exactly the same, but there is a broad alignment of principles, a broad alignment of methods. Some regions use a strictly ratings-based system. Some regions take a more qualitative basis of assessing the merits of a race. But I think we're moving towards a more harmonized basis of assessing the quality of racing within regions. As I said earlier, I think the idea of countries' racing being recognized and the ability to improve and promote is something which countries aspire to. And I think over the next 3 years, we would like to see perhaps a fundamental look at the way in which the Blue Book is formulated, the way in which countries are categorized within the Blue Book, and the criteria that are needed for people to meet to be in certain criteria. I think the fourth issue we would address will be the whole area of looking at specific regional initiatives that are being undertaken to promote racing, to promote the diversity of the breed of horses, and while still maintaining the integrity of the group and listed races. So, a couple of recent examples there is the Stayers program in Europe, which has now been adopted in Asia, and a number of the countries in Asia are now looking at what they can do within their race program to support the breeding and development of a more staying type of horse. Again, looking at the whole question of the diversity and range of horses that are bred and that are in the racing program. So, in the famous slogan of a political party back at home in Ireland, there's a lot done, but there's a lot more to do still in this area. But I think it's very important, Louis, area to look at.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very detailed review of what we have to do in one of our really fundamental issue. If you can go to the next slide, please. The free movement of horses. So as I mentioned it's been one of our key issues for the past 3 years, and it will remain even more for the next 3 years with the Brexit. And after we've discussed the first point, I will ask back Brian to tell us how we views from the most difficult country concerned by this Brexit possibilities or damages, possible damages. About IHSC, Winfried, an update and your interest in the African vaccine, African horse sickness, DIVA vaccine.
I think for the benefits of the member maybe, and especially new members, why we joined this cooperation with OIE, because I think when you look at austerity measurements, which a lot of jurisdictions face, horse racing, when it comes to health issue, movement of horses issue, are not on the high priority. There is what we could see, there was a significant lack even of understanding of basic principles, basic fundamentals when it comes to horse movement. And the OIE, in a way, had already then established a public-private partnership with the FEI, who, in a way, outlined then certain measures which could be taken and concepts could be taken. But I think looking at the thoroughbred industry and the impact on movement of horses or restriction of movement of horses on the industry is tremendous. So furthermore, therefore, we thought it's strategic important that we establish, like the FAI, a strategic relationship with the OIE, which we have achieved, and then in a way articulate as horse racing industry what our topics are. And we could clearly see that one of the fundamental issues is the education of government officials, where we have now a global program with the OIE, where we systematically, region by region, brief in a way the government officials about the horse industry, the movements, and the key issues which we face, and we have been able to shape certain developments which would be completely detrimental to the import-export of horses. So then, in a way, it is the further relationship, and Andrew will go a little bit more in detail. We thought it is necessary, if you look, for example, a country like South Africa, who has top-class quality bloodstock, but was for a significant period of time not be able, in a way, to be part of the international movement of horses, and how we can help to guide South Africa and working with the OIE to come to a roadmap how we could achieve this. So therefore, there are really practical benefits, but it comes back in a way to the major issues, which I think even equine influenza vaccination, etc. So Andrew will take you through the more details, but I think it is strategically, if we would have not established this partnership, this public-private partnership, I think we would, and we will see more and more issues coming up, while horse racing and breeding is not a key economic activity in countries and is therefore put on the back burner, and only with this cooperation, strategic cooperation with the OIE, we are able to address these problems even before they occur.
Thank you, Winfried. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Winfried indicated, this was seen as a key initiative for the IFHA when the existing strategic plan was formulated some 4 years ago. And it makes sense. So much of the work of this federation over the last decade has been dedicated towards the globalisation of racing, the achievement of international racing as really a further development of the success of our jurisdictions domestically. And it also makes sense that for global events to happen, you need global movements. And the indispensable relationship is one with the World Animal Health Organization, which is the body that sets the conditions internationally which countries can't depart from in terms of the protocols between sanitary authorities for the movement of horses. Now, in terms of the tactical issues that have been dealt with within this framework that's been achieved first by the FEI and the IFHA by separate public-private partnerships with the OIE, and now through one combined agreement under the umbrella of the International Horse Sports Confederation with the FEI, with the OIE, we see a couple of streams. One, which is very important, is to undertake the technical research that is necessary for the sanitary authorities for individual countries to be comfortable with allowing the movement of horses. Addressing such issues as, for example, equine influenza, which is perhaps the disease with the greatest production impacts for racing where there are outbreaks. And we face the situation that in most countries the disease is endemic and is dealt with by vaccination, but in other countries, notably in Australia and New Zealand, but also in a country such as, or a jurisdiction such as Hong Kong, where the disease is dealt with by vaccination, it's achieving a freedom of movement across those types of jurisdictions. And important to that is having a testing a testing tool that's available for individual country authorities to be more comfortable with the testing that's taking place during the pre-export quarantine and the post-arrival quarantine to facilitate the movement of horses. And so this has been one of the streams of research that has been undertaken under our relationship with the OIE to develop this new tool. Another area of research which has been fruitful has been in the area of glanders, which we know is a disease of increasing concern. And so this has been a dedicated stream of research under the program that's funded now by the International Horse Sports Confederation. Winfried mentioned African horse sickness. Now this is an issue, or rather the difficulties that this disease has represented for a member of the Asian Racing Federation, the International Federation, South Africa. This has been an historical problem which, quite frankly, has seemed at times to be intractable. The means of resolving it is, as I said at the outset, to establish science and to establish protocols that give individual country sanitary authorities confidence and comfort that they can accept movement of horses. And so what we've done, both at the Asian Racing Federation and the International Federation level with the OAE, is to try and establish a roadmap that would see the re-establishment of regular free movement of horses from South Africa to the rest of the world. Now, important to that has been identifying the potential for a vaccine to be developed. The historical approach to dealing with this disease in South Africa was one of a free zone. Now, there are very great difficulties with that. We've identified through the roadmap that what we need to do is to have a new paradigm, which means a quarantine vector-proof facility supported by scientific methods of determining that horses are free of the disease. And a vaccine is seen as potentially a very important component of this. And so this has been one of the research streams within the public-private partnership with the OAE. And for the strategic plan for the years ahead, this is something that we've established a subcommittee of the IHAC, and we're in the throes of appointing an expert on this particular vaccine to see this developed.
Thank you. So we'll now move to the Brexit, and I will go to my Irish colleague, who knows a lot. So we are working very closely between France, England, and Ireland in order to try to address what can be a no deal. And we would like to know how you view the situation.
Thank you, Louis. I would echo an awful lot of what Winfried has said. It's difficult for us in Ireland in particular to see any benefits in Brexit, but if there is one very minor benefit, it is that it has forced 3 countries in Europe, Ireland, France and Britain, to have a long, hard look at the systems in which we have operated the movement of horses between our countries over the years. And as Winfried and Andrew said, what I've certainly realised in this process is you cannot take for granted the understanding or the appreciation of government authorities and agriculture ministries in particular of the needs of the horse industry. In reality, the reality is that the agriculture ministries are primarily concerned about food production and farming issues, and even in a country like Ireland, the horse can be a little bit of a curiosity, and particularly so when you go to the EU. So just to give people from outside Europe some context, if you look at the race meeting yesterday, the 6th Grade 1 winners had 81 runners in the races. 42 of those runners came from Britain and Ireland, including a lot of the winners, I'd hasten to say, from Britain. They've already taken back control. But this week we will have the main yearling sale in the UK. Almost 2/3 of the sales catalogue at that yearling sale will have been sourced from Irish breeders. And next year, when the breeding season starts, we will have somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 mares will travel from continental Europe to Ireland to visit Irish stallions, and all the time going through the land bridge of the UK. So all those movements are currently facilitated completely freely by way of a tripartite agreement between the agriculture ministries of France, Britain and Ireland, which has been accepted and approved by the EU, that they accept that the sanitary standards within the sectors in those countries are sufficient to allow horses to move without any need for veterinary inspections at points of entry, with limited need for documentation for travel, and of course without any financial tariffs implications. So obviously when Brexit occurs, those agreements fall away. And I think, from our point of view, I think Ireland is probably the most exposed country in relation to Brexit, even more so than the UK, I would say, because of our isolated location. So this is an area in which I think Ireland has found great support from the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities. There's a number of people in the room who are much better qualified to speak about Brexit than I am. But what has happened is a group of professionals from the 3 countries, led by Paul-Marie Gatto from France Gallo, but including Des Layden from the Irish Thoroughbred Breeders Association, and people like Will Lamb from the British Horse Racing Authority and Simon Cooper from Weatherby's, have been working hard to go to the EU, as we did with you, Louis, as chairman of the IFHA, to put together not a problem, to present them not with a problem, but with a potential solution. So we have developed a proposal of a definition of a high health horse category, which we're requesting the EU to reflect in EU animal health law. So it will be the law of the EU that they accept that the thoroughbred horses, and there are 25,000 movements of those horses a year between the three countries mentioned, will be classed as a separate category in EU legislation. And that will allow continued free movement between countries in the EU who meet certain standards, and I will come on to that in a minute. The key aspect of that we want to achieve also is that it will facilitate movement between the EU and third countries who can prove that they meet the same standards. Obviously, the main third country in question here being Britain, but in time we would see that potentially being extended to movement of horses between EU countries and other third countries such as the United States or some of the Asian countries or areas like that. The proposal has had a positive first hearing. I think at the moment the situation in regard to Brexit is that everyone is focused on the split up and the divorce as opposed to what will happen after that, and it's coming very quick down the road. The key to this development is that the racing and breeding authorities in each country must show to their ministries for agriculture, who must then be able to give to the European Union the confidence that a proper and high-level system of sanitary controls operates within the sector. So key to that are requirements in relation to full-time traceability of horses at all times of their life, issues such as vaccination checks, veterinary supervision, recording of disease notification and disease outbreaks, and all of those issues. There's no concern on our part really that, when Britain leaves the EU, the standards in Britain, will remain the highest in the world. So I think it should be possible for us to show that the standards in those areas of sanitation and traceability within the EU countries who are able to meet those standards are matched by those in the UK, the idea being that that will facilitate trade with those countries. But I'm sure for anyone who's not involved in it, Brexit is a curiosity at best, but it's a real problem for us in Europe. And I think it's a real area, Louis, in which the IFHA, hopefully, if we can achieve a happy ending to this situation, will have delivered for one of its member countries.
Thank you for giving us your very interesting position as you are first on the line. And we will give all the support we can. There is a lot of meetings going around, so I don't want to start a debate on Brexit today because it's not one of the issues of the agenda, but we had to comment on it because it will be very important in our future between the three countries. And I know that there was, over the weekend, some discussions between the people concerned, and some of them are here today. But we have also to accelerate a little because we are not on time. So the next slide, it concerns safety and welfare protection. I will not go very long because I've always mentioned a part of it in my speech for the past 3 years about these best practice documents which have been prepared by the committee and we are now published, which are now published on our website. We have also all the discussion and the work which is done around IFHA and around the retraining of racehorses and aftercare, which are very important and on which Jim is taking some leadership outside Europe, and on which the Europeans are progressively moving. We are discussing a horse welfare charter. The next horse welfare committee will look at a project of horse welfare charter which has been prepared for France in order to prevent the government from regulating itself. And I think it will be an interesting debate for the welfare committee members. and concerning health, safety, and welfare of jockeys. But we will be happy certainly to learn that today Denis Segan will present us a session raising most of these issues. So we are already starting the new program. Next slide, please. So wagering. So we have a big debate on wagering, and I would like to ask Winfried if he has some specific points that he will not cover in his session that he would like to raise.
I think if you look at wagering, one has to see it under the background that most of the members of the IFHA are not wagering operators. They are either, in a way, wagering, they are racing operators or they are racing authorities. So therefore, what we do in this respect is definitely that we focus on the protection of intellectual property rights. And we have done multiple examples what we can do and how we can help different jurisdiction. But in the wagering sector, there is one thing, and if you look at cancer, in a way, which threatens our sport, one is doping, and the other one is the illegal market, is the illegal bookmaking. Because they are, in a way, when you look at the background, they are really mostly responsible for racing integrity issues. So therefore, we have in Asia, we have, in a way, really had a focus on establishing an Asian Racing Federation Anti-Illegal Betting Task Force, which has what I would say a most holistic understanding about how the illegal market operate, where the center of the illegal market is, what are the key driving forces are. And we have, with this, we have connected to Interpol, to national, in a way, authorities, law enforcement authorities, to work with them in a way to address this issue. One of the issues we discuss in the strategic plan, with this basis we have established in Asia, how we in a way can extend this, because illegal betting doesn't only take place in Asia. Even there are certain hubs, and to name one is definitely the Philippines, which is one of the biggest hubs for global illegal wagering. And therefore how we in a way then as a federation can connect to in a way the necessary authorities and bring this up to a level that authorities in a more cross-national way cooperate, because illegal gambling is goes across the borders, and a lot of times you have the national authorities only look at the national side. So that's something which we will discuss in the strategic plan, how we, on the basis what we have established in Asia, how we can expand this and then have a more holistic approach, what we can do in relation to illegal betting. We will discuss later in a way what we can do as racing organizers to maximize in a way the potential for value creation in the wagering side. So what we can do in a way really to, in a way, from field size to, in a way, structure of the races, quality of the races, etc. But this is in a way we capture later, and I don't think we should discuss too much in this session now.
Thank you. So we go now to the last slide, which is concerning governance of the federation. So as I said, the statutes of the IFHA were approved 25 years ago in that room. We have made a few changes, but very small ones. So we think it's time, after 25 years, to review them completely, to look at the structure, operation, and the particular management of the federation, executive council, what we need to improve the way we work, to review how the technical committee are functioning, to prepare succession planning for all levels of the federation. We had several changes this year of committees during the middle of the year, and we had to react very quickly because there was some important discussion going on in some of them. And also the problem of the membership. We have some members who appear, who become members, who then disappear. Then there is a new organization coming. We have problems about the legal value of our international agreement, people who are signatories or not, and how they apply it, how we can check the compliance to the international agreement. Very often we find out that some countries have signed an article and they do not apply it. They have not put it in the rules, or they put a part of it. So it's time for us to review totally the governance, to review the existing committees. As I said, I will propose to the Executive Council tomorrow to prepare, to create a special committee to look, steering committee to look at the governance of the federation, and we will also look at the finance of the federation in order to adapt our budget to the strategic decisions and orientation. So now we have no time, but we will still go for some questions. So I don't want to reopen the debate of the sessions that will come later on, and you have 4 sessions that are important and that cover part of our future. So do you have any specific point which you think will not be covered in the future sessions today? And if you somebody wants to ask a question to Ene, I think you are a very complete presentation which covered all subjects, both from what we've done for the past 3 years and what we are planning for the next 3 years. But if you want to have any clarification without starting a Brexit debate that could go on for hours, please do it. So we have some hostess with micro. We were so complete. So we'll keep the questions for the sessions? Yes? Okay. But I will thank our team. So I think you had a good example of the personal involvement of our vice chairman and executive council, and at the same time they are building new training centers in China. They are doing a lot of other things. But they still take the time to work for IFHA, to look at the file, to follow the work of the committees. And I want to ask them to give them a big round of applause and to thank them for their marvelous work. Thank you, gentlemen. So you can go back to your seat with the applause. And now we will go to a subject which I think, as I said earlier today, that this room is a good example of how diversity could be improved. And I will ask Will Lamb. Originally it was Nick Russ, the chairman of the group, that was intending to come, but for personal reasons, so he could not come. And so we'll ask William Lamb, the executive director of the British Racing Authority, and on behalf of this steering group. And he's also very much involved in the Brexit. He's had a very busy time. Will?
Thank you, Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's great to be here. And firstly, my congratulations to France Gallo for a triumphant return to racing at Paris-Longchamp yesterday and over the weekend. This is always a fabulous trip, highlight of the year. And yesterday was very special for a number of reasons. 2 exceptional fillies, and I, for one, look forward to the replay later on. There's a real buzz right across the racecourse. I start also, as Louis says, with apologies from the British Horse Racing Authority Chief Executive Nick Rust, who would love to have been here. I'd also like to convey his thanks for the well wishes to him and his wife. And we're clearly not just colleagues within international racing, but friends and a real community. But we were able to find another man at the BHA. Forgive me. We found another man at the BHA to talk on the topic of diversity and inclusion within British racing. And it's good to talk about something other than Brexit, frankly. And I've been asked to cover the background to the issue, some recent history and policy developments, particularly in Britain, and the wider policy context, the steps we're taking to boost diversity and inclusion, both within the BHA and the sport as a whole. I'm well aware the topic can be met sometimes with a cynical response, be seen as a fad or a buzzword or words, but hope to convey the moral and commercial case for boosting diversity and inclusion, place it firmly in the context of our desire to represent firmly the society in which we operate. As such, in British racing, we see it as critical to our long-term success and our sport achieving its overall potential and growing in the future. We've heard in the past at this very conference how in horse racing we ultimately derive our ability to operate from a social licence. So there are clear and serious implications if we fail to reflect and be representative of modern society. I and we in Britain lay no claim to be experts in this subject and by no means have all the answers. And part of the point of today's conference, of course, is to learn from each other, and we'll absolutely be borrowing, stealing indeed, wherever we can. But just a few points of emphasis as well before I run on to the presentation. Commitment in this area in terms of addressing diversity and inclusion cannot be fleeting or temporary. It has to be meaningful, long-term. What, for instance, we want this room to look like in 5, 10, 20 years' time, and what do we want our sport to look like by extension. The two are, of course, completely linked. And at this relatively early stage of development, much is about mindset. We want cultural change, so it's about winning hearts and minds. That's our main focus at the moment. We know as a sport we need to adapt, and simply complying with new regulatory requirements will not be enough. I'd say there's a link, of course, to the upcoming discussion on growing betting turnover in our sport as well. So I'll come on to what we're doing within the BHA and emphasise as well also it's really noticeable internally how passionate our younger staff are about this area. They've been among the driving forces to getting us where we are now. Again, linking back to our ongoing social licence point, we ignore the views of our younger colleagues, participants and audiences at our peril. And whilst we do have a big opportunity, with statistics to follow endorsing that, we are grappling slightly with one of our big strengths in horse racing, men and women competing equally, could potentially be a weakness set against the growth of women's sport as distinct codes. You may all be seeing it as well, but certainly in Britain, it is a huge growth area in terms of broadcast coverage, print and media, sponsorship, and fans and audiences. So let's kick on into the presentation. So just a condensed timeline here relating specifically to Britain, and the likes of Julie Crone, Michelle Payne and Rachel Blackmore, and among others, have been or are acting as trailblazers. That's Jenny Pittman there, the first female Grand National winning trainer in 1983, and Hayley Turner, who has also had recent success in France under their new initiatives, indeed having come out of retirement. I think the main point I'd highlight there is in 2016, when our government made it mandatory under this new sports governance code that all sporting governing bodies that access or seek to access public funding have a diversity action plan in place. It's a non-negotiable as far as our government are concerned, and that code also covers areas around representation on boards and governance matters in general. Now, in racing, we don't access public funding in the same way as other sports, but have been working closely with our government on funding legislation and have committed to meeting the highest tier of governance standards. And very few sports that code applies to didn't already have such an action plan in place. They are well ahead of us. But as I say, it can't just be about regulatory compliance. I'll come on to some of the steps that have been followed since. So what do we know at the moment? Well, we have a long way to go, no misapprehensions about that. Broad boards across our sport in particular are not as diverse as we'd like to be. These figures are for the key study conducted by Oxford Brookes, which I'll come on to. And a lot of research has been taken within a horse racing MBA that has launched in Britain in recent years. And the number of female jockeys is one thing, and it's actually falling at the moment. But those other figures there are arguably a bigger concern and explain perhaps the decline. There's a disparity between the number of female jockeys and the rides they have, and particularly the rides they have in big races. Our race courses fare far better, actually. We have some excellent managers, chairs as well, and they in turn operate as role models in our industry and mentors as well. And we have a huge opportunity in terms of our customer base and gender breakdown. Race courses are safe, social places and seen as such. But towards the bottom there, we in no way know enough about other protected characteristics and the real makeup of our sport and its diversity. So in terms of the case for change, it's of course unarguable that we should provide equal opportunities and not discriminate in our sport. But we need to treat efforts to enhance our diversity and inclusion unashamedly about the bottom line, as well as the moral imperative. More diverse leadership and employees will typically lead to better results, particularly if we're chasing new customers. And I did think, forgive me, there was a graphic there from a big McKinsey study that shows unequivocally that boards, thank you, with more diverse representation have far better results, particularly for those industries that are chasing new customers. We have to make sure that our sport is accessible as possible and reflect that in our makeup. We're in a war for talent in terms of our workforce within racing right across the sport, particularly amongst stable staff, something I'm tasked with as well in Britain. And in an increasingly diverse country, let's again not go there on Brexit, with indeed animal welfare views hardening amongst the young, it's crucial we speak to and engage with all audiences back to that social licence point. 44% of racecourse attendances are made up of so-called millennials. I'm not sure how many we have in the room today. My team assure me I don't count. But I applaud the panel comprised of them at the betting conference on Friday in terms of developing new initiatives to take betting on the sport. And we need to take the right steps to having them seeing racing as a sport, and an open one at that, and has values according with their own. That's how millennials nowadays invest in the sort of experiences they want. So what do we have going on at the moment within British racing? A quick run through. Top left there, Careers in Racing is a BHA-run careers attraction campaign, been running for over a decade now. Industry-wide, not just stable staff, but quite a heavy focus there at the moment. Digital campaigns in the sort of language that young people want to hear, talks at equine colleges, but increasingly more recently, we're trying to market the wide range of roles into non-traditional channels. Diversity careers fairs are a big growth area in Britain at the moment, and we partner up with other organisations accordingly, with over 1 million people last year going through our targeted social media advertising and website in general. The Mental Health Charter, next along there, absolutely links with our desire to be inclusive as a sport. All the major organisations in racing and our key charity, our partners, Mind, the charity here, are very well respected in Britain. There's visible support for this campaign, in particular a series of excellent jockey videos around mental health, addiction, nutrition matters. It's vital we are seen as accessible, tolerant, adaptable as a sport to different needs of different people. Racing to School, long-standing within Britain, goes to 200 or so primary and secondary schools over the year. We'll engage with over 14,000 children this year, particularly more recently from inner city children. A recent event in Newmarket, whole group of kids from Brixton that have frankly never left London before. What's that smell? It's freshly cut grass. They'd never experienced that before. Women in Racing as an organisation is almost 10 years old now, has an excellent mentoring and bursary scheme, and has really been one of the lead forces behind this agenda. Annual events. It also funded the Oxford Brookes research that I'll come on to. The Silk series is run by Arena Racing Company for female jockeys, has been very successful, and the Jockey Club also have a development award in the Northwest. A careers advise and training service as well. We've had huge take-up of that immediately around retaining staff in the industry that may be new or from different backgrounds. And of course, internationally, there's lots going on. In particular, something that's attracted a lot of attention is France Gallot's initiative around female jockeys as a proactive step that has yielded results. As we see it, over 150% increase in the number of wins for female jockeys, and we'll continue to monitor that. Longines, our great sponsor, have had their Ladies in Racing Awards introduced in 2013. That's Racing Victoria's Indigenous Youth Leadership Academy. Just partnered up with Tennis Australia, as I understand it, and has taken a lot of students recently to Godolphin Yards in Australia. And then back within Britain, Stonewall is our leading gay, bisexual and transgender rights charity we're seeking to partner with. They link up with all major sports in Britain around this Rainbow Laces campaign. Kick It Out is a respected and long-established anti-racism group that is the go-to organisation there. They're very visible. And then in particular of what other sports are doing, the England and Wales Cricket Board, back to women's sport. I mean, they sold out the Women's World Cup at Lord's earlier this year. Beer sales were down considerably, but interest in the sport up as a result, you could argue. But their recent action plan is absolutely focusing on tapping into South Asian communities in particular. Significant investment required, of course, in facilities, urban cricket centres and the like. Diversity in coaching, they have adopted the Rooney Rule that our American colleagues will know about, and significant bursaries awarded as well. But whatever we do, of course, it doesn't matter if the perceptions of our sport remain as they are. And a number of those in the industry are ones that we have to work hard to change. We hear still regularly that women don't fall as well as men. Young people, especially in urban racing, apparently just have no interest in working outside or in horses. And from outside our sport, we can still conjure up elitist images. The point on betting there, I'd say, is more related to the customer base of betting. Certainly Britain is far more diverse than leadership within betting companies. But that's something also we want to partner with betting on. But the Oxford Brookes research was undertaken and published, it was undertaken 2 years ago. It's the Centre for Diversity Policy Research and Practice at their business school, commissioned by Women in Racing, funded by our Racing Foundation. 3 stages of research around desk-based online questionnaires. 80% of the respondents were female in the first place, and a lot of phone interviews with all the key stakeholders within racing. It looked at working environments for all the different career sectors, career development and support that may or may not exist, and the position of women in senior roles in the sport and on boards. It did focus on gender diversity, but did highlight and discuss issues relevant to wider diversity and inclusion, albeit, which are case in point again, with a very low sample size there, sadly. But around the recommendations, they did call for a set of industry targets to be set in these areas which we've not yet moved to, but certainly monitoring mechanisms and the setup of a key steering group within the industry, which I'll come on to. Career development and support is absolutely vital, raising the visibility of successful women in the sport. Sources of grants should be explored for career development opportunities. Work-life balance is a challenge for racing in particular, but it is also seen as a hindrance to making ourselves more diverse and inclusive. Issues around childcare and the like. But there needs to be far better communication of employees regarding the rights that they have, and we're taking big steps to tackle any unconscious bias that may sit within racing's leadership. Diversity training is being built into training modules that are undertaken at our racing schools, and industry-wide we're seeking zero tolerance around bullying and harassment. Our diversity steering group and the BHA have made a conscious effort to call out any inappropriate behaviour or language that we're seeing. So the report had significant reaction. I'd say, proactively a number of national media organisations were in touch with us and others in the sport. It had more coverage than a lot of our major events would have at times. And reiterating in terms of our response that it's not just the right thing to do, but we've got to act for the commercial future of British racing. So as well as setting up the industry-wide steering group, I'd say in terms of another sort of domestic change in terms of legislation, the BHA has reported this year for the first time on its gender pay gap. That's a government requirement now, and it's not about equal pay. It's not about which we have equal money for equal roles, but it's the earnings of women set against the earnings of men within the organisation. Our mean pay gap is at 16% in the BHA, and something we want to tackle and find out why. We have far fewer women in senior management positions in the BHA, and our relative concentration of women in the lower pay quartile shows we need to do more to develop our talent. In terms of our recruitment practices, now they're all anonymous applications. Our senior management have all undertaken unconscious bias training. Our recruitment practices are being audited, and we've increased significantly our training and development budget. But then the steering group we've set up, we asked all major stakeholders in the sport to nominate the best candidate for the group rather than, frankly, just the usual suspects. We then had an application process that was open to all, advertised publicly and inundated with applications, actually, and have a group of passionate individuals from right across the sport, media and betting. All have different experiences. The first meeting of the group, we went round the table. Why are you here? What experiences have you had in the sport? And some of them were chilling, frankly. But they are absolutely passionate about bringing change, and they've got plenty of expertise in places around diversity and inclusion in other sectors and industries. And then the action plan, its highlights, starting with racing's leadership. It is not the case that the BHA can bring around on its own the change we want to see as a sport, but we have to set an example from the top. We're going to coordinate this work, but it has to be an industry-wide commitment. Understanding the landscape we're in, as mentioned earlier on, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence rather than empirical matters. More of the MBA studies are looking at new areas, but we don't have a good enough understanding of the makeup of our workforce at the moment and the reasons people aren't necessarily attracted to our sport. Data and insight, it will be vital here. Recognising our workforce, where we have diverse workforce in place, we have to celebrate it, provide far more opportunities for their development, including through media training in particular. And where there are role models, we'll be using them, but borrowing from other sports as well. The worst thing you can do is identify a role model and try and match it with the wrong community. And so you have to showcase them in the right way and with the right audiences. Telling the stories of those that have been successful in the industry. Silvestre de Souza, as champion jockey over from Brazil, has been a huge star and big push around Champions Day each year. Senior vacancies are now in particular advertised in a more creative way to reach a wider pool of talent. Positive action rather than positive discrimination is what we're seeking here, but we need to widen that talent pool and get different skills in. In terms of how we promote racehorse ownership as well, and we have a new ownership strategy rolling out in Britain, it's vital we break down that barrier that it's just seen as something for the rich in society. The growth of syndicates helps as well here, but it's crucial we're just joined up in all of our activities to try and change the face of our sport. Supporting and promoting female jockeys. We're not currently looking to introduce weight allowances, but certainly the standards of facilities for female jockeys at racecourses is something that comes back in our responses, and we're looking at where we can identify investment needs while still monitoring international initiatives. And again, media training has been a big boost for female jockeys. Research is still being undertaken on what the barriers are for ethnic minorities group, and we need to ensure that our racecourse marketing is not projecting an image that we're actually trying to move away from. Our rules, such as dress codes, preventing a wider audience from enjoying the sport or feeling welcome for it, and are our facilities up to scratch in terms of accessibility. So in terms of next steps, and we are at the start of the journey, for sure, I won't use Brian's political slogan, but yeah, there's a lot more to do. Showcasing the horse, actually, I should have mentioned there as well. If we've got 80% of the population living in urban areas now, we have to get them understanding or getting more access to horses, because we show from our inner city riding schools, and there's an excellent piece actually just launched today on our BBC state broadcaster website. If young people are given access to horses, they do still develop those close bonds we know can exist. The interest and passion can be there, but we have to make it more accessible. But we are shortly, imminently, we have appointed a head of diversity and inclusion at the BHA. That'll be announced imminently. Really good number of impressive applicants. It'll be based at the BHA in a BHA role, but absolutely responsibility for coordinating our steering group, ensuring the action plan is followed through, and hoping that we'll see real progress in the short term, but again, under no illusion that it's a long-term initiative. On their immediate to-do list will be an industry-wide event we want to hold in 2019, would welcome international participation there as well. And some more research is being undertaken here by the Liverpool MBA. We're following up on the women jockey study around qualitative reasons why a trainer's not employing, why our owners may be not seeking to use female jockeys when we have the evidence that they're just as effective, just as competent, when there's no difference in riding ability there. And attitudes regarding sexuality within the industry, a new study will be coming out shortly there. Many other sports in Britain are openly discussing and addressing this, and why we only have had one jockey prepared to openly state that they're gay whilst race riding. So we've clearly got a long way to go, and many of you may be well ahead of us, but I hope this provides some insight, some food for thought. And if we're serious about our belief that horse racing can be a force for social inclusion, and at the BHA we certainly are, it can be, then we have to really start taking the necessary steps to reflect modern society within our workforce, participants and fans. Thank you.
Thank you, Will, and good luck. We will see who you appoint to lead the diversity group. I'm sure it will be a woman. It should be. So I think it's something which should be one of our concerns. I think we always talk about it, but we very often do nothing about it. I look at the Executive Council. We have only one charming lady in the council. And I think in our governance, review of governance, we should have that in our mind. So thank you. We will have a 10 minutes coffee break, no more. And then we start with the big session, the one wagering, just after the coffee break.